Coming up on this episode of Tom Talks Rubbish.
I'd only been writing for Daily DDT for about a year when Speaking Out happened. And then I
Mhm.
kind of felt like there weren't many women given their voices, many women wrestling fans talking about that stuff, which was really hard, especially because some of those people that were named, I had seen wrestle locally at my promotions and I had interacted with them, even if it was just a hello or anything like that. And so that's just kind of a shock to realize like what you see in the ring, and and of course I know that's not, wrestling is not like that for everything, but I felt like if I, as a woman, I felt like it was like I had to talk about these things, and they're not easy things to talk about. I do cover the Vince McMahon case a lot, his various things, and they're not easy to talk about, but I feel like as a woman I should do that, because if I'm not doing it, then who, sometimes it feels like if I'm not doing it, then who will.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and today I'm back with another interview. This time I'm joined by the one and only Sam from the Powerbombshell, Fansighted, and many, many other places. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we could finally make this work. You're a busy guy.
To peel the curtain back, guys, I asked Sam to do this in, this is possibly airing in October. I asked Sam to do this in April and was like, and then didn't mean, I said to you off air, didn't I? I was like, didn't mean to ghost you, but life just got busy.
I completely understand how that goes, and as I told Tom, it happened when it was supposed to. So I'm glad that we finally made it.
100%. So if we take this back, where do you first discover wrestling, Sam, as an overall fan?
Oh wow. I did watch a little bit as a kid because my dad would watch sometimes, but I didn't really get into it until I was a teenager, and I spent the summer at my grandparents' house, and my cousin Amy, she was there as well, and they would watch WCW. And so that summer I got really immersed into it, and it was like that was back at the time where like if you liked WCW, then you didn't like WWE, and if you liked WWE, you didn't like WCW. So I was very much like I would not watch WWE programming for a couple of years because I was like, no, WCW only, and so that's where it started, and then I did eventually get into WWE, and then it just kind of snowballed from there.
What era are we talking about? It sounds almost like the Monday Night Wars era, but
Yes, it was. It was about, yeah, it was about that time, and it was when Goldberg had his streak that at the time, because I was a teenager and didn't know any better, I thought the streak was real. I didn't realize that they were padding it. I was like, "Oh, sure, he's been wrestling at house shows," and not knowing that Goldberg would not wrestle house shows
yeah.
until much later. But yeah, so about that time, and like and also like Wolfpack, when it was red and black is like when I was really into it, and so I loved Wolfpack, NWO. I loved or NWO Wolfpack, I should say. I loved that, and so I was during that time period of WCW.
Why does the Wolfpack version of NWO speak to you so much, do you think?
I don't know what it is about that, but it was so much fun. And I think it was unlike anything I had seen at the time because I was still fairly new into wrestling at that point. And it was just really exciting. And I loved Kevin Nash. I loved Scott Hall. I loved the Outsiders. And then, of course, they brought, Lex Luger and Sting in. And so I loved all of it. And they were just, especially because then they kind of became where like they were taking over everything. And it was just, they were just really at the time. So as a teenager, it was a lot of fun to watch.
How much of the original NWO's run have you gone back and watched?
I really have not gone back and watched some of it, and I think I really should because I want it to get like the full picture. Because I was like, obviously, as a teenager and watching it at that time, it was definitely a different experience. And so now to go back like as an adult and to kind of see like how it unfolded, I think would be a really cool thing to see, especially because of where it ended up. Because obviously they went into the Hollywood era of
Mm.
it and all of that, and which I watched obviously unfold in real time. But so I think going back to the very beginning and watching it as a whole would be really fun to do.
You mentioned how it ended there. Obviously, unfortunately, that meant that it ended with WCW going out of business. 'Cause
Yes.
when WCW ended, your fandom ended for a while.
And I did by that point. I had kind of gotten into WWE at that point, and so I was watching the episode where Shane McMahon bought
Yeah.
WCW, and I was like, in shock. I couldn't believe that it was happening. And I was like, what are you? Because I think if I remember properly, I wasn't even watching the WWE broadcast. I think I was watching the WCW broadcast and saw it. And I was like, what is happening? And so it was just a really crazy time as a fan. And so I did eventually, like I said, I did get into WWE. And so it was fun to see the WCW guys come over and kind of see, obviously Chris Jericho came over, and there was like Dean Malenko, and like there was quite a few, and obviously Rey Mysterio, and quite a few people came over. And so it was nice to like see them, to still be able to see them, even though WCW was gone by that point.
You mentioned there you finally got into WWF at that time.
Yes. Oh, yes.
What,
Yeah, it would have been.
what was the storyline that finally got you? Okay, I'm here if you know.
Yeah, I think the one of the first episodes I watched, unfortunately, was a very sad episode. It was right after Owen had passed, and so I tuned in, and I saw these wrestlers like having these like really big emotions and not hiding it, which obviously I'm glad about. But it was just seeing them on a different side, and I was like, oh, okay, so maybe they're not so bad, maybe they're and so then I just started watching, and then I really got into like, because that's when there was the like Stone Cold and The Rock were really popular, and they were doing the Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon storyline, like, or Mr. McMahon, and like my dad was really into that too, and so like we all, like my dad, myself, and my sister would watch, and so we watched all of that stuff play out with Stone Cold and Mr. McMahon and The Rock and Mick Foley, and just all of that time. And so it was a lot of fun. And just looking back at it, I mean, the Attitude Era was a really crazy time that you probably couldn't get away with today. And I don't even know if today I'd be as into it, but at the time it was a lot of fun.
You mentioned today you might not be as into the Attitude Era. What if I flip the question on you and said to you, you're getting, I don't know, the type of wrestling you like now, but when you was a kid in the Attitude, I know what I mean. Like you have this type of wrestling you like now, but as a kid, do you think you'd still be into the wrestling you like now?
I mean, I think so, because I mean, I think it might be into more of I really appreciate what Orange Cassidy does a lot, so I think I'd be into like the comedic type of stuff. But I think that's a really good question. I've never thought of it like that before. And I want to say yes, because I really enjoy it now. But then I was like, well, would I have been as into it then? And I think maybe like some of the stuff that's happening now, like where we do see a little bit more of the hardcore stuff, which I actually was not really into more of the hardcore stuff until a few years ago, when I started watching GCW a little bit more. And then
what broke you in GCW?
Yeah, and Jesus was like, I wasn't watching like hardcore stuff. I was watching like, I guess, the Santa, like a little bit toned down versions and a little bit tamer versions, and it was stuff with like the Second Gear Crew, which is like Mance Warner, and Effie and that type of stuff. And so then the more I watched it, I guess I kind of, I mean, there's still times, don't get me wrong, I will turn away and I'll cover I'll definitely squirm. Like thumbtacks will always make me squirm, I think, because I can imagine what that feels. I think that's why most people, because we can imagine what it feels like to get stabbed with thumbtacks, just accidentally pricking yourself, so like landing on them. I think it always makes me it just makes me squirm. But yeah, and then I really watched like Jon Moxley had a match against Filthy Tom Lawler in Defy, and that was just an insanely bloody match, but the match itself was actually very good, and it's a match that I actually bring up often, because I always talk about Jon Moxley, like he's like, there's the WWE version of Jon Moxley, then there's the AEW version, and then there's the New Japan version, and then there's indie Jon Moxley. He has different levels, and
he wants to bring you. I'm going to ask you about this in a second, but you can see he wants to bring that version into AEW.
Yeah, he does.
With what he did you see this? With
to Darby.
He did to Darby's ear.
Yes. Oh, that definitely made me squirm, and it made me uncomfortable. So I was like, that might be maybe in AEW, that might be the most that he can get away with. But yes, he definitely brings levels to it. And you can always tell that he seems to bring a different version of himself depending on where he's at. And I like all versions of it. I just really enjoy Jon Moxley a lot. And just his style of wrestling. But yes, he definitely he will try to bring what he can into AEW, but I think he knows there were probably limits to it.
You mentioned there that you love Jon Moxley and people
Mhm.
like that. Where is your current fandom, Sam, as we record this in August of 2025? Where's your
Um,
current fandom?
my fandom is a lot of it is AEW, but it's also like I do love New Japan. I got into New Japan probably in like 2017. So I'm a really big New Japan fan. I watch a lot. I do watch ROH. I watch a lot of indies. Sometimes I do watch GCW when I can, or if there's matches I really want to see. Sometimes because there's so much wrestling to watch, I'll just watch the matches I want to see. And then I watch there's a local indie here called Ashe Wrestling, and I go to their shows. They've had I think they've had like 13 shows, and I've only missed two of them, and
Wow.
one of them is because they were in Las Vegas for Mania weekend, and so I didn't get to go to that one. But yeah, so I like a lot of indie wrestling too. So it's usually it feels like I watch wrestling pretty much every day of the week.
How do you balance that sort of, maybe you got to watch wrestling for an interview or an article, but then how do
Right.
you sort of balance that? No, I want to watch this for fun. Don't ask me to write about this.
Right.
I
Well,
want
and
to.
that is, yeah, I will say I do watch WWE because I have to cover it. I write for Wrestling Inc. And so on Mondays and Fridays, I do have to watch Raw and SmackDown. If I were not writing for them, I probably would not watch it. There are wrestlers that I like there, but it's not, I've kind of grown past that type of, or their product. Even though, like I said, there are talent there that I still love, and I'm still glad that I get to see if I am having to watch. And then so like Wednesdays, like I don't have to write. So Dynamite is just for me. I mean, I will usually sometimes we'll talk about it on the podcast, but like that stuff's for me. Watching New Japan is for me. Like watching a lot of times, even watching indies is for me, and I'll just have to find time to, trying to find the time to watch it because we're
Oh,
very
yes.
lucky and very
Oh,
spoiled to be wrestling fans in a time where we have access to so many things.
I had this conversation with my girlfriend the other day because she was
Uh-huh.
like, how the heck? She hadn't seen me in like a week or so because she'd been on vacation. And she's like,
Uh-huh.
how much wrestling did you watch when I was away? Because I'd watched Raw, SmackDown. I think I may have even turned on it because she was looking at our Netflix queue.
Oh,
And I was like, yeah, yeah, I have a problem.
it is. It's definitely addicted. And well, there's storylines, and then you want to see how it's going to play out in the next episode. So they definitely hook you in to see. You're like, oh, or you're going to be like, wow, I really want to see this match next week, or oh, this match is going to be great. And so then you're like, well, I might as well just watch all of it.
Oh yeah, I have a problem. I really do. So you mentioned your
I completely get it.
so you mentioned your podcast there with the
Mhm.
great lady that is Mel
Yes,
for Power Bombshell, I believe it's
yes,
called.
it is.
So how does that come about? How do you join Fight Game Media? All of that good stuff.
So a few years ago, I was actually looking for another website to write for. In addition, at the time, I wasn't writing for Wrestling Inc. It was just Daily
Oh, so
DDT.
writing comes first.
Yeah, that's how my writing. Yep, I got started in writing first. I started with Fansided in 2018. I went to the very first All In before AEW even existed, and then a friend of mine, because I used to just tweet about wrestling all the time, and so
Mm.
and my friend was like, she saw that Fansided was looking for writers. She was like, you should do it. She was like, you already write about it on Twitter. Why not like write for somebody? And so that's how I got started. And I covered like the Wednesday Night Wars. I was covering like 205 Live and stuff like that. And then they Fansided the main site. They quit covering wrestling, so I moved over to Daily DDT, which is still under Fansided. And so I've been with Daily DDT for I believe 6 years now. And then but so I was looking for an additional place to write, and I came across Fight Game Media because my friend JD Oliva, we wrote together at Fansided, and I saw he was writing for them. And then after a few months, Garrett approached me and said that asked if I'd ever considered podcasting, and I was like, no, not really, because writing is what I'm good at. Like, I like to write. And so he was like, well, would you consider a podcast? And he's like, I'd like to have a show with two women, because we don't have that on our network, and I feel like we need a woman's perspective on the wrestling industry. And is that something you're interested in? And so I told him sure, and then he was talking to Mel, and Mel and I still actually have never met in person before, but we have been.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
The podcasts that have come out through the pandemic. Oh yeah, I've never met my co-host in person. Isn't
Right.
that mental?
Yeah, it's very crazy because Mel and I hit it off right away, and we've been doing our show for 3 years now.
That's really crazy. Like I always.
Yeah.
So how did you know? You said you hit it off right away. How
Yes.
did you sort of know that your chemistry would work, if that makes sense, if you've never
Yeah.
met in person?
We talked and we had conversations about like the kind of wrestling that we enjoyed, and then we kind of just talked about our other things that we liked outside of wrestling, and we're really similar. We're close in age. She's only a few years older than I am, so we had a lot of similar childhood experiences and a lot of things like we liked a lot of the same type of movies and TV shows and things like that. So I think like if Mel and I lived in the same city, like we would be friends whether or not there was a podcast. And so we really hit it off. And so I don't know. We joke that Garrett is the podcast whisperer because he's put other on our network. He's put other people together that you would never think, that they'd work out. But somehow Garrett has a knack for putting people together, and it works.
Garrett is so good. I had him
He
on
is.
the show at the start
Yeah,
of this year. He's such a good dude. Like
he
he's
is.
a
He's
nice
great.
dude as well.
Yes, he's super nice. And I love working with Garrett. And he helped us when at the beginning of our podcast, like we weren't really sure what to do. So he came on and kind of led the conversations for the first 3 or 4 episodes to help us kind of get used to each other and just kind of the podcasting format. And then he like took the training wheels off and was like, off you go.
So you mentioned there, we both said how nice Garrett is and things like that, and
Yes.
The fact that he helped you with training wheels for your initial podcast and
Yes.
things. So what is something you maybe learned from him when you were podcasting with him, or like maybe watching podcasts he's done? What is something you learned whilst podcasting with him?
Garrett is very good at keeping on topic and keeping the conversation moving, where especially Mel and I have a tendency to, especially because we live stream. So we have people in our chat so we talk to them or answer questions we have, where Garrett is very good at keeping, like he knows that he has to keep, because obviously he works with Dave Meltzer, and so he's got to keep him he's got to keep him focused so that because Dave will go all over the place forever. And so I think that's what Garrett is really good about. He has definitely taught me, and I probably could use reminders from him sometimes to keep things on track. But he's good at keeping the conversation flowing and asking good questions to keep so there's not a lot of pauses in there, so you're not, or awkward pauses or anything like that. Garrett's really good about, and he's good about listening to what you say to ask questions off of that, which is, and obviously in podcasting is, hugely important.
You mentioned Dave Meltzer there and things like that. Obviously Garrett podcasts with, for me, one of the GOATs in this game.
Yeah,
so what did it mean to you that he sort of chose you to podcast when he works with someone like that and things like that?
Yeah, that meant a lot to me, and it was funny because when I started working with Fight Game Media at the time, I didn't realize that Garrett worked with Dave, or I didn't really realize like what their relationship was. And so and I kind of got thrown into podcasting, and then I realized like, he does, like you said, he podcasts with one of the most famous voices in the entire industry, and yes, most respected, and he's a historian who thankfully has recorded all of these things for decades. And I don't know, when Dave is not doing that anymore, I don't know who picks that up and continue. Like what he's done has been incredible. And so yeah, to have Garrett like to hand pick me like that definitely makes me feel really good, and it makes me feel like he trusts me and that he thinks that my voice is important in this space, because there are a lot of people in this space, which is great, but I have so to for Garrett to get behind me like that has been hugely important, and he's Garrett's a great mentor and a great friend, and I'm so glad that our paths crossed.
Oh, that's really, really cool. You mentioned being glad that your paths crossed and things like that.
Yeah.
What, where do you think your career would be now if you'd sort of said, no, you know what? I'm good with the writing sort of thing. I want to not stay in your lane, but that's the word
Right.
I'm going with. You've
Right.
sort of declined to podcast, shall we say?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I don't know if I would have picked up podcasting elsewhere. I mean, maybe I would have, because I have, through the writing side of things, I have made friends with people in wrestling media who do have podcasts. So maybe I would have just been on like as a guest or something like that to give opinions, but it might not have been something I focused on. I might have, writing may have been where all my focus is, because I have like that's what I've always really been a good writer, and like that's what I've always focused on. Like that was my best subject in school. I was terrible at math. I was good at writing.
So was
so,
I.
so and I went to that's what I went to college for. I have a degree in communications, and my focus was in journalism. So I think I would have just stuck with writing and maybe made occasional guests on, occasionally guested on podcasts, but I don't know if I had said no, if I would have gotten into podcasting as much as I have.
What seems really cool about you? You mentioned the tweeting about wrestling to start off with. You're not afraid to say your opinions, for lack of a better word. I've watched the
Thank you.
podcast, if you know what I mean.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Where does that come from? That sort of that zero meadow, for lack of a better word.
Sometimes I have to remind myself, just like, because I mean, there are times where I'm not sure if I should say things. And then I finally have gotten, sometimes it's still, not, because sometimes I'm like, man, I know that this is not going to get the great. And I don't say things to like stir the pot or anything like that. It's not to get people riled up. It's just to share my opinion. And then I guess also, because I was at the time that I'd only been writing for Daily DDT for about a year when Speaking Out happened. And then I kind of felt like there weren't many women given their voices, many women wrestling fans talking about that stuff, which was really hard, especially because some of those people that were named, I had seen wrestle locally at my promotions, and I had interacted with them, even if it was just a hello or anything like that. And so that's just kind of a shock to realize like what you see in the ring, and and of course I know that's not, wrestling is not like that for everything, but I felt like if I, as a woman, I felt like it was like I had to talk about these things, and they're not easy things to talk about. I do cover the Vince McMahon case a lot, his various things, and they're not easy to talk about, but I feel like as a woman I should do that, because if I'm not doing it, then sometimes it feels like if I'm not doing it, then who will? But then even stuff away from that, just sharing my opinions about what I'd like and don't like. And, I don't want to sugarcoat things, but I also don't want to I don't want people to feel bad. Like if I don't like something, I don't want them to feel like, oh, well, she's not going to, I think wrestling is a place where you don't have to like everything, and you can still have good conversations with people, because there's things that I love, and there's people that I interact with, and they're like, that's just not for me, I don't like it. And I get that. And so but yeah, I think it's just becoming more comfortable with my own voice, and being able to share and people come to me now, which is a really still something I'm surprised about. People come to me and they ask for my opinion, like, what did you think about this? Or like, I've been waiting to hear what you had to say, which is just a crazy thing to think that people want to know. And so I feel honored that people, want to hear my point of view on things, which is a really nice thing to hear.
You mentioned there the Speaking Out and the Vince McMahon stuff. How you mentioned in your mind you felt like, if I don't do this, no one is gonna. So how do you sort of balance that? Maybe you've written a fun article this day, but then how do you sort of get in that headspace to be like, no, this is criminal sort of thing, and like
right. And
I'm trying to think of the right word, but I know what I mean. This is serious now. How do you get your headspace in that headspace, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, it's definitely a hard thing a lot of times, because sometimes it's just the information that you're getting is just not pleasant information. And so then sometimes it's just the anger at that stuff happening that kind of makes it easier
Mhm.
to get in that headspace of just been like, this needs to be talked about. Like we can't just, yes, wrestling is fun. And like, I love talking about these type of things, but I also like, for me, I can't look away from it now. And some people are able to compartmentalize it, but I can't. It's just not the way I look at it now. It's hard. But yeah, it is kind of hard to get in that phase. And sometimes it's just reading it and then maybe talking to some people about it. And then that kind of helps me like, okay, what do I want to, or what message do I want to convey to people? What do they need to know about this situation? Like, how can I present this to them so that they understand? Because a lot of times, like with the Vince McMahon lawsuit from Janelle Grant, like I have read the lawsuit, like I've read every single page, which was very hard to read, but I felt like I had to read it to understand what I'm talking about and to be able to explain it to other people so that they don't have to read that. Then they can at least come, they know they can come to me and they're going to know like, okay, well, she's telling me the important things that I need to know that are in this document, so that I don't have to read it for myself. Or I don't have the time to read it. Let me see what the latest is in this update. And so I just try to be, as factual as possible and as straightforward as possible so that people understand what's happening, with different situations.
What is one subject that because you said you cover hard ones and
Yeah.
things like that. What is one subject that you're like, no, producers or whatever the word is for writers? I don't really know how it works for wrestling sites. I'm not gonna lie.
Right.
But like
The editors. Yep.
editors, thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
Yep.
No editors, I'm really sorry. No, I'm not touching.
I don't think that I have yet to come across that case, but most of them, when they approach me, they do give me the option. Like if they approach me, like, would you like to cover this story first, or are you comfortable with it? So usually they ask me, like, they don't just be like, hey, can like, we want you, oh, look, did you see there's an update? Go write about it. They ask me, like, are you okay with covering it? Is it
Oh,
something? So they kind of, at least I have really great editors who have been really supportive of me, even covering the stuff and being open and honest about it. Luckily they're like, just, write what you have to say. And so but yeah, generally they'll just come to me and say, hey, do you want to write about the latest update, or do you want to cover this story? How do you feel about it? And so they generally ask me so far I have not come across anything that I don't want to write about. I mean, of course, but I didn't know what I was getting myself into until I started reading the lawsuits, and it just got harder and harder. And so I did, and like I did, one of my editors, I told him, I was like, it was a lot to process, and I was like, it's going to take me longer to write it just because I wasn't expecting those type of details to be in this lawsuit. And so luckily they gave, like they knew it was a time sensitive story, but they also gave me the space to like be able to process what I had read and then to be able to put it into words for our readers to understand.
that's really, really cool. How important is it to you to not work with good people? Because it's really important to work with good people, but to work with editors that understand that. Someone like Garrett who understands
Mm-hmm.
that you needed some support with podcasting and things like that.
Yes.
How important is it to you to work with people that have your back, for lack of a better phrase?
Oh, it's hugely important because life happens outside of wrestling. And sometimes the wrestling itself is a lot, but then sometimes, there's other things happening outside of the wrestling
I
bubble
saw this
in your real
quote
life.
that's basically like wrestling is the most important of the least important things.
Right. Yes, that's a really great way to put it. And so, but yeah, it's great to have people who are really supportive and that you can talk to about things, about like if you're not sure how to, or if sometimes I'm not sure how to cover something, I can talk to them about it, or just get there and be like, I feel like I'm going to take this approach on this subject. What do you think? And so sometimes they'll give me some tips, or like, maybe you should mention this. And so it's nice to kind of have a sounding board, to talk to them about. And then if it's something like outside of my personal life that I'm dealing with, and I just maybe can't, I could talk to them about what's going on, and they can give me, the support that I need. Or there's been times like last year, I had to take time off because I had to have thyroid surgery. I had to have my thyroid removed, and it turned out the one on the left side ended up being it did have cancer, but it was
Wow.
already removed, and so I had to get the other one removed, and so obviously I can't really. Well, I've had a few. I did do I think like one or two podcasts after the first surgery, but after the second one, I had to take like 5 or 6 weeks off just because my voice was my voice would go in and out, my throat was, and so I had
Strain.
yeah, and so it was a lot of strain, and so luckily like Garrett was wonderful about it, and so was my co-host Mel was wonderful. I had people at Fightgate Media who stepped in and filled in for me during that time, and they were like, what do you need, we'll take care of it, don't force yourself to come back. And I really missed it because I missed talking about wrestling, or big things would happen. And so sometimes I would text Mel and I would be like, hey, will you tell them that I think this or like this, that they knew,
I
like
love
kind of
that though.
right. And sometimes I'd hop in the chat for a few minutes and just say hello to everybody and just let them know that that I was doing okay and I'd be back soon. And they were really wonderful. My editors work, so I wasn't writing then either. My editors were really wonderful about it. So having that type of support, both with wrestling and with real life things, were hugely important to me.
You mentioned there your sort of medical journey and medical
Mm-hmm.
struggles there last
Mm-hmm.
year. Does that change your perspective on how hard you want to work, sort of thing, and maybe changing scheduling and priorities, for lack of a better word?
Well, it definitely sometimes like even now because it's been almost a year now, and so my voice has gotten stronger, but sometimes if we're talking too much, my throat will start hurting, and then I'll have to be like, so I have to try not to, I have to remember not to push myself so hard. And so we obviously, Mel and I are chatty people. We have people in our comments who ask questions and comments, and so sometimes we have to like we probably should have like a hard out, but we usually don't. Sometimes our podcast goes as long as 3 hours, sometimes
Mm.
we can get out of there in like 2 hours. And so that I think is the approach, is just monitoring my health and things like that, and making sure that I don't do too much. But I do like having wrestling, or like especially the podcast, as something to kind of look forward to every week, because it
Mm.
gives me something to focus on. And even if I'm feeling burnt out or anything like that, I will I'll talk to my co-hosts about it, and we'll figure things out. And so sometimes she has some things going on in her life that that we have to kind of work with as well. And so it's a really good balance between the two of us. We're both very comfortable where we can go to each other and be like, hey, I'm not feeling so great this week, or there's so much happening in my real life that, like, I don't know, let's just talk about these topics and just be done with it. And so, but I think we both have had, the podcast has, for both of us, has been a thing that has kept us something to look forward to throughout the week.
Mm. You mentioned burnout there, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
really curious to talk about how do you deal with burnout, first of all, as a creator, but also as a wrestling fan?
It can be a lot, and I think sometimes the hardest thing is even realizing that you're experiencing burnout, because
Mm.
I didn't realize I was experiencing it like maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago. I didn't I was asked, my editor approached me with an idea for an article, and he was like, can you write it? And I was like, sure. And then like I realized I was kept putting it off, and I didn't really, and like I was like, oh, I got this stuff to do, I'll just get to it later. And then once I finally sat down to write it, like I was having a really hard time. Like the subject was an easy subject, but I couldn't figure out, and I realized I'm hitting a wall. I'm getting burnt out. This is why this article was coming so hard to me. And so I talked to my editor about it, and he was like, it's not a rush. He was like, it's not time sensitive. Just take your time. He was like, if you want to come back to it in a couple of weeks, you can do that. He was like, it's not, because luckily it was just an opinion piece, and it wasn't something that, we needed right away. And so because I didn't even realize what was happening and why I was putting it off, or why I was having such a hard time writing it. It was because I was getting burnt out. And so sometimes it does take just taking a day away. Like last Sunday, I did the podcast. I watched Forbidden Door, and then I had to help out with NXT Heatwave coverage. And so it was like I was talking about wrestling from 10 a.m. and writing it until 10
Oh,
o'clock that night.
wow.
And so it was just a lot. So like that, I ended up not having to cover Raw on that Monday because it came on during my day job. And so I was like, I'm not going to watch any wrestling today. I'm going to just watch stuff. My DVR is piling up with other stuff. I'm just going to watch that and watch no wrestling at all. I'm not going to talk about it. So having that kind of built in like a day, I try to do at least one day a week, or even if I watch wrestling for a little bit, like say I watch like Ring of Honor, then I will go watch something else. I will watch, or I'll go read, or I'll find something else to do that's not wrestling related to kind of like give myself some space. But then I'm also reading, I'm reading the Young Bucks book right now. So then sometimes I end up, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go read. And then I'm still reading about wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. Been there 100%. You mentioned, we've mentioned Mel a few times in this conversation. And I'm
Yeah.
really curious to talk about, what do you think you bring to the show that maybe she doesn't, and vice versa?
That's a really good question. I think, wow, I think part of it is just maybe just having a journalistic background and getting to experience different things. Because, like, I do, so for example, like, I do media calls with Tony Khan. So then I can bring out that perspective of, like, okay, well, Tony said, especially if we're talking about something that's happening, I'm like, well, Tony was actually asked about this. This was his response. Or I asked Tony this question and this was what he told me. Because I will tweet out the thread, but it's the difference between like obviously reading words and then like hearing that person. I'm like, well, I can hear like Tony said this and he seemed to think this. And so like I think having that perspective is definitely something that's different. Is just kind of bringing the journalistic side to it. But then Mel is really great at she has knowledge on all kinds of topics, like especially like when it comes related to like law or just different things. And so she can definitely bring a lot of things that I can't, or she gives me great information. And so sometimes we'll be talking like during the podcast and I'll ask her a question because I know that she'll probably know the answer. And so I think we complement each other very well with our strengths.
That's really, really cool. As we look at wrapping this up, Sam, because I do want to be respectful of your time.
Sure.
Believe it or not, we've been talking almost 40 minutes.
Wow, this time has flown by.
I have a bit of a self-indulgent question.
Okay.
Before we start doing my wrap-up questions.
Okay.
Fellow podcaster, fellow interviewer yourself, where can I improve? Everything in between.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Where can I improve? Everything in between.
Where can you improve? Oh, that's a good question. Oh, wow. I was not expecting that. I think you do a really excellent job. You're really great at the questions that you ask, and I can tell that you're listening, which is, going back to what we talked about with Garrett, like listening and asking a question. And I think just keep doing that. Like, I think you're really easy to talk to. Like, I feel like we're just having a conversation. Like, sometimes I forget that this is even being recorded for anything because I just feel like we're having a normal conversation, which is my favorite type of thing. I love having interviews with people where it feels like we're just having a conversation and it's not me. Because I've been on the other side like you, where I'm like, they're hardly giving me any answers, or they're giving me like, and so then you're like, because I interviewed somebody a few months ago and it was her first interview. And so she was answering the questions, but not giving a whole lot. And so I was trying to like dig. And then finally, as she started getting more comfortable, she started, answering things. And then she also she emailed me afterwards. She was like, well, I was thinking about that question you asked. I wanted to tell you this and like add that. So that was a really cool thing. So I understand. I think you are really great at answering questions. I think you're doing a great job.
I really appreciate that. I really do. There's a lot of comparisons I've seen online to you and the great lady that is Ella J from the Wrestling Gal podcast.
Yes.
You both started off by tweeting and things like that. Yes. We've seen how big she's got and things like that. So how much of maybe she isn't, but how much of an inspiration is she to you and things like that?
Yeah, I think she is. And it's funny because even though we kind of crossed, because we were doing podcasting and tweeting and things like that, we actually both write together at Wrestling Inc. But our shifts are different. So we don't always come across because I usually am working at night. She works during the day, but sometimes our paths cross and we've gotten to know each other, which is a really cool thing. And I think Ella, she's wonderful. She's really carved a really great path for herself in promoting women's wrestling, which is something I'm very passionate about. And she obviously is very passionate about that. And she interviews she always finds wrestling. I'm like, well, I don't even know who this is. And she's like she's so great about cultivating or getting people's names out there in women's wrestling that you may not have heard of before. And she always finds them. She asks really great questions and she introduces you to people. And she's got to do some of the cool stuff where she did what was it when Mickey James had her all women show? Like I know Ella was involved in that, which is such a cool
She was the
thing. So
producer, I believe.
right. I think you're right. Yeah, like that's so cool. Like I love seeing that, women being able to be in this space and to be able to do cool things like that and to even to push women's wrestling even further than it already is and to help using her platform to do that is incredible. And I think Ella just she does incredible work and I think that sometimes she doesn't get enough credit for what she does.
I fully agree. Big ups to Ella because she's awesome.
Yes.
I really do.
Yes, she is.
Just quickly before we do my traditional wrap-up segment,
Okay.
two questions for you, Sam,
Uh-huh.
regarding success and things like that. If you stepped away tomorrow from podcasting, writing, etc.,
Mhm.
would you view your career as a success?
I would say yes. I think that I've gotten to do some really cool things, and I think probably I mean I even joked about it at the time when I got to I was fortunate enough to get to ask Ding a question in his final media scrum that he did, and I joked like if this is it, like if my career ended tomorrow, like this is the peak. Like I don't know that I can do even I was like I've gotten to interview cool people since then, but to be part of that moment with Sting in my home state because it happened in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so to be able to like, so just that alone to me is successful. But I think being able to, I think I would say yes because I have been able to talk about some hard things that are not easy to talk about in this industry, and they're not fun things to talk about. And I think that I would say yes that also has made me successful.
What do you want your legacy to be if you do step away as a creator?
Um, that women's wrestling is important and should be taken seriously. It should have the equity and the equality that men's wrestling gets. It should just that's and also just talking of not I do just not being afraid to talk about the hard things is also something that I want to be part of my legacy is to that it's important to while I love wrestling and there's so many positive things that I talk about and love to talk about, I have not been afraid to talk about the not so great things. But if we sweep them under the rug, then they're just going to continue. That's how it's gotten to the point that it did because people look the other way because it's not fun to look at. And I know that it's not, and it's not fun to talk about. But I think that talking about it and keeping it out there is just as important as talking about all the good things that I think you have to have a balance of those things.
Mm, that's really cool. And I really sort of not agree because it's your legacy, but I
But
really find
thank
it
you.
very sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Inspirational, like just really cool.
Thank you.
But as we wrap this up, Sam, we are going to
Yeah.
do the traditional Tom Talks Rubbish wrap
Okay.
segment called Generic Wrestling Question. Those of you
I'm ready.
those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this is where Sam will be asked her favorite match, favorite pay-per-view card, favorite wrestler's entrance theme, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. Basically, just the questions I assume you're asked on social media or in
Yes.
the podcast live streams. So now you will have a place to be like, I've answered this. Please go watch this. So
Right,
watch the
exactly.
match of all time.
My favorite match of all time is probably Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada, the first match that they had, because obviously they just had their fifth one, and so probably the first one. And the reason I say that is because not only was it an excellent match, but I think it was the first time that I really realized like this is what wrestling can be. Like I've always seen a certain type of wrestling growing up, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I still enjoy, like I love what I grew up watching, but I was like I always saw either what was happening in WCW or WWE. And I had gotten into some indies and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, wrestling can be more than just wrestling. Can be this. It can be this. It can be this. It can be like." And I realized, like, I never thought I'd be into technical wrestling, but like, Zack Sabre Jr. is one of my favorite wrestlers. So, and I love comedy wrestling. I think it's so much fun. Like, I think you have to be super talented to be able to carry a wrestling match and also entertain the crowd by being funny at the same time. Like that, there's so much that goes. So I have so much respect for comedic wrestlers, and so I just like being able to see all types of things. But so I think Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada really opened my eyes to like wrestling can be this, like this kind of thing. They can put on these type of shows. It can be this type of art, can have this, all this, like the match itself was great, but then there's the storytelling behind it between these two. And they're, to me, are two of the greatest wrestlers ever. And so I think to see that just, I love that match so much. And I went back and watched it recently, and it was just I loved it just as much as I did the first time because I stayed up because it happened at Wrestle Kingdom, and so I stayed up, which I know that a lot of UK fans have to stay up and watch things, or they have to get up. You know,
No
I know fans,
comment.
yeah, so, and I get it. So I have gotten up early. I've gotten up at 3 a.m. to watch Wrestle Kingdom for the last few years. I have gotten up and I've done that, so I get it. And so that's a match that I think it happened at like by then it was the main event. It was like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was just completely re-energized and just on the edge of my seat the entire time. And just then afterwards, I just couldn't believe it, and I was like, and then I was like wired, and it's like 8 a.m. That's like really exciting. But so, and I feel like in the wrestling that it's fun when wrestling makes you feel like that.
That's really, really cool. What about your favorite overall pay-per-view card or event?
I would say, and maybe it's recency bias because it's fairly recent from this year. I think Revolution, AEW Revolution this year. Besides the main event, I did not like the main event. If that main event had not been on there, it would have been the perfect card. It would have been a 10 out of 10 card. Just the matches all the way down from top to bottom were just incredible. I was enthralled with everything. I loved all of the matches except the main event. And then they kind of gave us a redo that Wednesday on Dynamite, and that match. I was like, if that match had been on Revolution, would have been a great all-timer card. But I was like, that probably. But then, I mean, and then I go back to, and I'm kind of biased because Revolution last year, the one that I was at, because it was Sting's final show, but like I remember seeing on paper because it was going to be Will Ospreay versus Konosuke Takeshita, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a really good match. I didn't know they were going to put on a 5-star match in front of me.
Oh yes.
Like I was
yes.
I was on my feet, and I knew it was going to be good, but they just exceeded all expectations. And that show was a really great show. And then, of course, because it was Sting's final show, and he comes out and he has his kids with him who are dressed like him, and they just have this really fun match, and just you could tell that it meant a lot to him. And then being there and the aftermath and watching him kind of celebrate his final match and everybody coming down, and it was a really wonderful moment to be a part of. And so I'm very grateful that I got to experience that.
That's really, really cool. What about your favorite wrestler's entrance music?
Wow. Favorite wrestler's entrance music. I mean, like there's like the iconic, like CM Punk's Cult of Personality is like one of the most iconic things ever to hear. And then, I would say like Cody Rhodes, I think his entrance song is something that transcends, like everybody knows that. Yes, it's just great. And so when I got to go to All In and he came out, and it was just, I have never felt a building move like you could feel the energy as he's coming out. Everybody's excited, everybody's on their feet, they're buzzing. I've never felt anything like that at a wrestling show, and I don't know that I'll ever feel anything like that again. And so I think Cody has a perfect theme song. It's just, it gets stuck in your head. It's perfect. And then I'm a really big, like, I think Willow Nightingale has a great theme song. And then Kenny Omega, Battle Cry, I think is just a phenomenal song, and just I really enjoy that. And then there's, like, of course, you've got Orange Cassidy, who used to come out to Jane, and then he came out to Where Is My Mind by the Pixies, and so like he always has great stuff too. So there's a lot of really great theme songs out there.
That's normally the one that everyone goes, man, that's really hard. That's really hard.
It is. Yeah, I'd have to say, I don't know, Cody's is pretty high up there, I think.
That's really, really cool. What about your favorite tag team?
My favorite tag team, well, I have two favorite tag teams. My favorite tag team will have to be the Hardy Boys because they're from North Carolina, like I am. And so that's when I was really into WWE, was during when it was the Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudleys were doing all kinds of amazing, cool things. And like, I love tag team wrestling, and it's really started with watching them. That's where my love of tag team wrestling came from. And it seems like now it's harder for promotion. I know there's a lot going on, but it seems like tag team wrestling is harder for major companies to book. Like, I found another excuse me, independent company I watch is Deadlock Pro, and they
Mm.
are really great. They actually had a tag team festival in July that I went to, and it was so cool just to
Ah,
see the whole show. There were two matches that were not tag team because it was just in between the tournament, but it was all around tag team wrestling, which was really cool. But yeah, I'm a huge Hardy Boys fan. I love them. I love the team when they went to TNA and they were doing the Broken Universe stuff. Like I loved all of that. I thought it was really cool and really creative. At first, when it was starting, I was like, what am I watching? And
mm,
then the more it started to unfold, I could just see it was just something to have fun, like to not take seriously and just to have fun. And you could suspend disbelief and, see all the things that they were like. I really loved. I think they're really innovative. They're really innovative, especially being in the wrestling business this long. They still make
mm,
themselves relevant. They're so beloved. And so I'm a huge fan of them. And then my second favorite tag team is Motor City Machine Guns.
mm.
I love them. I watched them in TNA. There were times I've talked about this. TNA had the times in the States. It was hard to get. Like it would be on one cable channel for a while, and then they would drop it, and then you wouldn't see it for a while, and then it would pop up on some other channel. So, but Motor City was always there, and I think they're so underrated. I think maybe now that they're in WWE, people are kind of seeing that more. But they're so underrated at the things that they do and how much they have contributed to the wrestling industry. And I hope that they get their flowers and that people realize how important they are to tag team wrestling, especially within the last maybe 10 to 15 years, just the things that they have done and have innovated. And I'm a huge fan of theirs too.
That's really, really cool. And then finally, Sam, the biggest generic question, in my opinion. Who is your favorite overall wrestler of all time?
Of all time. I ask myself that question sometimes and it changes. I'm a huge fan of Kenny Omega.
Mm.
I'm a huge fan of Kazuchika Okada. I have one of my favorite actually is Hangman Adam Page. He started at my independent promotion back when so he was early in his career. So I have watched him
Is this when
from
he
the
was a
very
teacher?
Yes, he was a teacher in Virginia and he was here wrestling locally and I thought he was a good wrestler, but like I never in a million years expected him to be where he is now. And so to watch him from the very big, like some of the very beginning of his career, when he and then like I saw him, I was really surprised like when he joined, I had read he joined Bullet Club and I was like Adam Page, like that same guy that used to come out in the green
Mm.
hat, green trucks, like that Adam Page. And then I saw like what he had been doing, and I just got on board. And then he went and wrestled in the G1, and he became so. And then just to watch his ascent in AEW since the very beginning, like so, he is somebody that is definitely. And I know I just gave you a whole bunch of different answers, but I think it's just being able, because I've been able to watch his career from the beginning and then to watch how it's come full circle. And even though this is his second title reign, it just feels like we've got to watch this, we've been on this journey with him since
Mm.
AEW's beginning. And so just to see that is a really cool thing.
That's really cool. You didn't mention a hangman match for your favorite match. So
That is true. I
I
do
always
love.
like to ask people, what is your favorite like hangman match in that respect?
Wow. Probably the cage match with Swerve.
Ooh.
Probably that. Just because I mean the wrestling itself was really good. Like I think Hangman, but there's so much passion and the story. Like I think it's all of it was the whole package. Like I love their feud. I love Swerve. I think Swerve is phenomenal too. And I think that I don't think anybody else could have told the story that these two told.
No.
And to then yeah, so that and that was the one of the ones that got kind of weird because you have the syringe spot and then you have
Ooh.
yeah, which was it made me uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe not that. Like, I was like, I've gotten into some stuff, and I was like, oh, not that. No, that's not for me. But it
As
just,
someone that has to use syringes in his daily life, ooh, no.
yeah, right. I'm sure. And so, yeah, the storytelling with that, I love that match. And I think he's a really great, I've really come to appreciate Texas death matches because of Hangman, because he's had some really great Texas death matches. I think that's kind of his wheelhouse. And that's the one that, when he announces that's what the match is, he's going to go
Yeah, people
for it.
gonna die.
Yeah, right. It's going to live up to its name.
Yeah, definitely. As we wrap this up, I obviously want to say thank you, Sam, for a great conversation. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed this one today. But as we wrap this up, the question I end this show on is,
Mhm.
I believe, as YouTubers, podcasters, writers in your case, or even just people with some general social media, we're all sort of gonna live forever in a very, very weird way if you think about the world. So what is one piece of content you're like, yeah, guys, I'd like to be remembered for that? And then what is one that you're like, no, I do not want to be remembered for that?
Oh wow, these are whoa. I think I'd probably like to be remembered for there was an interview that Mel and I conducted on Power Bombshells in October of last year where we had on a human trafficking expert who kind of explained like what human trafficking is and the difference between human trafficking and sex trafficking. And it was just a really important conversation because I think that obviously is not a conversation that happens in wrestling. And I know I've put some really good, I've been able to interview some really cool people, and those I hope live on as well too. But I feel like that's really important, and that maybe kind of encapsulates what I do, which is putting women's wrestling in the forefront, but also talking about the things that we talk about. And that's not a that's not interviewing someone like that is not something you typically find in the wrestling space. And so I'm really proud of that interview. And so that is something that sometimes I will remind people that it's out there. But yeah, I think that's probably my favorite piece. And the piece I don't want them to remember, that's that's a really good, probably an opinion piece that did not age well. That's probably
We've all had them.
yeah, we've had that. Yeah, so probably something like that. So probably an opinion piece, and I was like, wow, what was I thinking?
That's really, really cool. As we wrap this up, Sam, please promote yourself. Where can the good people find you, your work, etc.?
Yes. Okay. So for my, actually, you can probably go to my social media and you can find my link tree links to all of my written work. But I do write for Daily DDT and Wrestling Inc. And then Power Bombshells is live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, except for pay-per-view days. And if the pay-per-view is on a Saturday, then our show is on a Saturday because we preview the pay-per-views. But generally, Sundays at 1 o'clock is generally when you can find us. We are on the Fight Game Media YouTube channel, but you can find me on Twitter. It's at Samantha_1713. I'm on Blue Sky, the same thing, just no underscore there. And then you can find Power Bombshells at Power Bombshells on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram.
It's well worth doing, guys. One of the hardest working people in this space, but one of the nicest as well.
Thank you.
So if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter or X at Tom Talks Rubbish, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.
Thanks for watching this Tom Talks Rubbish conversation. Before you go, please make sure you leave a like on the video, share it around, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish on YouTube, as well as follow Tom Talks Rubbish on Twitter/X.